2 minutes till broadcast, 1 minute till streaming. One minute till broadcast. We are now streaming.
If you all are ready, I will.
Who does the video thing go by itself, or is that?
Yes, if you all are ready, we'll get started. It's 1 o'clock. And I'm going to call this meeting of the City Council for work session to order. And we'll start with a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Presiding Chair. Mayor Williams is on an excused absence, and Mayor Pro Tem Middleton is delayed today. Councilmember Nate Baker is also got an excused absence, and so I'll start with the regular roll. Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Councilmember Presiding Chair Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Rist.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just moving along, announcements by council. If anyone would like to start, I'm looking to my left. Yes, Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone out in the community, including city staff, city bus drivers, our emergency response. I know several churches who opened up their doors and done a community-wide effort. There are several, lots of residents actually who still do not have power. And so the city and the county have opened warming shelters, and there's been a lot of coordinated effort. And so I just wanted to thank all staff, city, county, community-wide. This is when Durham is at its best, in my opinion, when we all work together, and I just wanted to thank everyone. I also quickly wanted to thank I was able to go to, and I'm going to shout these kids out because I'm going to pull up their, I went to R.N. Harris last week and read to some kindergarten students, and my understanding was that they were going to be watching today, so I just want to shout them out. Ms. Frederick's kindergarten class at R.N. Harris, thank you so much for having me last week. Hopefully y'all are watching. You're excellent students, and you have an excellent teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Caballero. Councilmember Cook.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to reiterate my great thanks both to my colleagues sitting up here, but also the entire staff for this onboarding process has been a bit of a whirlwind, and everyone's been taking so much care and time with me, and I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to say thanks again.
Take your time. Councilmember Rist, did you have anything to add? If not, then we'll move on to I'm sorry, I think just a couple additional announcements. Just to note, I am presiding today because Mayor Williams is not in town for U.S. Conference of Mayors, and Mayor Pro Tem is out of town for a visit with the president. So I will request to move a couple of things around a little bit, just in case. I don't want us to lose quorum or anything, but I do have to depart at about 3:45 today. So I just want to give everyone a heads up. We're going to move through this meeting fairly quickly if I'm presiding. That's all. Other than that, I'm moving to priority items by the city manager.
Good afternoon, Madam Presiding Chair, other members of the Durham City Council. I do have a few priority items for you today, but prior to getting to those few items, I would like to call Deputy City Manager Bo Ferguson up to the microphone to make a brief presentation and update on the community-wide response to the power outages in Durham County. So, Bo.
Thank you, Madam Manager, Madam Presiding Chair, members of council. Appreciate this opportunity to update you and the community on our response to the ongoing power outage that's affecting a large number of customers in Durham, and to answer any questions you may have about our plans. I will apologize in advance. I've got a lot of this information is hot off the presses, and so I'm juggling a little bit to make sure I provide you all the information you need, and we are still working on some details that we'll be providing to the public as soon as those details are finalized. So let me begin by echoing comments made by Councilmember Caballero. We are deeply grateful for the partnership that we have seen beginning yesterday when this outage came to our attention in the afternoon, outpouring of support from Durham organizations, individuals, and partners who always step up and always offer their support to their fellow residents. We have seen that in droves. The city manager and myself were on a call just this morning with some of those partners, and we are grateful for that. And I will capture in a minute some of their efforts, but just wanted to appreciate all that work, as well as our partners in government who are responding to this, our partners at the county and here. So let me break this update into sort of two phases, the right now phase and the phase that will kick into effect this evening. Right now, county libraries, specifically the main library, the East Regional Branch, the North Regional Branch, the South Regional Branch, and the Southwest Regional Branch are all serving as warming centers. The regional branches are open. I just got this updated. The regional branches are open until 6 p.m. The main library is open until 8 p.m. And for the public's benefit, I'd like to read the street addresses of those locations. So the main branch is 300 North Roxborough Street. The East Regional Branch is 211 Lick Creek Lane. The North Regional Branch is 221 Milton Road. The South Regional Branch is 4505 South Alston Avenue, and the Southwest Regional Branch is 3605 Shannon Road. Those facilities are open as warming centers that anyone may go to. The regional branches are open until 6. The main library is open until 8 o'clock. As a reminder, city transit is available for free, so people may use city transit, and we are continuing to hear from volunteers who are offering for help with transportation during the day. I'll cover that in a second, but at this time we don't have immediate information about transportation, but hopefully people can use the existing Go Durham network to access those locations. There is a tremendous community effort ongoing now to provide warm food for anyone in the affected area, and that is being led by Durham Congregations in Action. They are providing that and doing a tremendous job. They are coordinating directly with DHA, so there's a direct connection between DHA and the organizers of this effort to ensure that hot meals are being offered proactively at DHA properties that are affected by the outage. They are canvassing neighborhoods, sending meals into neighborhoods, doing some door-to-door work. But for anyone who is listening who needs to access a hot meal. They may call Durham One Call. We are receiving that information. We are prepared to capture that information and convey it to the volunteers who are providing the meals. Durham One Call is 919-560-1200. That can be called now. Our call takers in Durham One Call are prepared to collect that information and distribute it. So those hot meals are available now and ongoing. We've also been made aware that Communities in Partnership, located at 101 South Driver Street, is handing out food now, both food pantry and I believe warm meals, but we've been made aware that they are, that's a location people can go to get warm meals now. So that is the daytime status update that hopefully will meet the needs of our community. Beginning this evening at 8 p.m., Durham County Emergency Management is standing up an overnight shelter. That shelter is going to be located at the old North Durham High School. DPS has made that facility available. That facility is heated. That facility is appropriate and ready to host up to 150 individuals this evening. And let me get the street address for you. That is at 117 Tom Wilkinson Road in Durham. That location will be open starting at 8 p.m. Residents who have their own transportation can drive themselves. We are currently arranging for a shuttle, most likely to be provided by Go Durham, that will transport individuals from Wellens Village. We're finalizing the schedule for that, so we will release that information later today, but there will be free transportation from Wellens Village. We also are coordinating with community volunteers who have offered with assistance, so there may be additional transportation options, but we don't have that information to present at this time. We will release that as soon as we have it. There will also, the emergency management is also working on transportation directly from the warming centers to the shelter this evening. Those details also are not finalized. The shelter that will be open at 8 p.m. this evening will be available until power is restored. So this is not just an overnight shelter. This will be the potential of a 24-hour operation up until shelter is restored. And it will, at a minimum, be an overnight shelter. If power is restored early in this event, the shelter will remain operational overnight, at least until tomorrow morning if power is restored. The only scenario under which that shelter would close is if all the residents voluntarily leave early, if the shelter is empty after power is restored. But at this point, the shelter is prepared to be in ongoing operations going forward. As of about 15 minutes ago, we do not have what I would consider actionable information from Duke Energy as to when they anticipate the outage to be resolved. They have a time of 6 p.m. on their website, but my conversation with the Duke official leads me to believe that time, I wouldn't consider that time reliable at this time. So we expect an update from Duke Energy later this afternoon, but at this time I would not want anyone to have any misconceptions about when the power will be restored, and would encourage all of our residents, whether they rely on these resources or their own planning, to have a plan for the evening and overnight hours if they are impacted by the power outage. I would not rely on the 6 p.m. time. At this time, I think it would be wiser to have an emergency plan in place, better to be prepared and not need it. I believe that those are all the details I have at this time. Madam Manager, is there anything we've discussed that I left out? And after that, I'll ask if any members of council have any questions we can address.
Thank you, Bo. Seems complete.
If there are any questions from members of council? If not,
Thank you.
thank you both.
No, yeah, just thanks for the comprehensive and thorough report. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, and I do have a few other agenda-related priority items for you. Agenda item number 6, the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, Federal Airport Improvement Program Grant Offer 3-37 2026-0056-065-2024. The City Council is being asked to suspend the rules and vote on this item during the January 18th, 2024 work session so the grant agreement can be executed and returned to the Federal Aviation Administration by their February 5th, 2024 deadline. Agenda item number 15, professional engineering services contract with Freese Nichols, Inc. for the Northeast Creek Sewer Basin hydraulic model. City Council is being asked to suspend the rules and vote on this item during the January 18th, 2024 work session so flow monitors can be installed as soon as possible. Installing monitors sooner allows flow monitoring data to be obtained from the wastewater collection system for both dry and wet weather flows, and having more data assists with model calibration. And finally, agenda item number 18, update and presentation on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, BIL, and Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, and others. This will be a 20-minute presentation. Slide number 9 was updated to reflect the award amount for electric buses, and slide number 10 was updated to reflect the award amount for the Village Transit Center since your last publishing date. So thank you very much, and that is all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Manager. I'll move through the other priority items, and then we'll swing back to suspend the rules and vote on those items that you've mentioned. Priority items for our Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Chair. The City Attorney's Office does not have any priority items, but if I may, I'd like to take a point of personal privilege.
Of course.
To introduce an extern that we have with us this semester. Her name is Carolyn Calder. Carolyn, if you would like to come up and just do a brief introduction of yourself. Carolyn is a second-year law student at UNC Law School, and we will have her working on a variety of projects.
Thank you, members of the council, and thank you, Madam Attorney. As Madam Attorney mentioned, my name is Carolyn Calder. I'm a 2L at UNC Law. I'm a Durham resident. I grew up in Cary, and I had the privilege of working with the Durham Housing Authority this summer as a law clerk there. So it's a pleasure to be here and to get to continue work in local government.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you're doing the service in Durham.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Madam
Appreciate
Presiding
it.
Chair. Thank you.
And Madam Clerk, if you have any priority items.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Chair. The City Clerk's office has no items.
Thank you. I am going to ask that we move up our approval of the, I think, of the items for 6 and 15, before 6 and 15. Also for item 1, 2, 3, 4, just so that you can, well, I just really just need to move item 4 up, because I just want to make a request of council if we can hold that item until the next work session. The Racial Equity Commission is meeting Saturday for their retreat, and I just want to make sure that that's okay, or to make the request, if that's all right. So mainly for item 4, that's all. Okay, so I'm going to open the vote, or essentially it's just a request for a motion to suspend the rules so that we can, or do we need to accept the priority items of the city manager for items 6 and 15? And does 18 need to be also? It's just an update. Okay, so just to accept the manager's priority items.
Moved.
I hear a motion by Councilmember Caballero and a second by Councilmember Risk.
Second, yes.
All in favor, if you would raise your right hand. Your other right, but thank you. I think we have a unanimous decision, and we'll vote. We'll vote to suspend the rules. A motion to vote to suspend the rules.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Riss, a motion, and Councilmember Caballero, second. All in favor, if you raise your right hand. And a motion to approve item 6, which is the U.S. Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, Federal Airport Improvement Program Grant Offer 3370056-065-2024.
So moved. Second.
I heard a motion from Councilmember Caballero and a second from Councilmember Cook. All in favor, if you'd raise your right hand. It is approved unanimously, and we'll move to item number 15. Item number 15, Professional Engineering Services Contract with Freese Nichols, Inc. for the Northeast Creek Sewer Basin Hydraulic Model.
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Councilmember Caballero and a second from Councilmember Risk. And if you could all raise your right hands. Oh, well, I'm sorry. All in favor, raise your right hands. Thank you. It's unanimous approval. So for item 18, we will approve the update automatically. And for item number 4,
Does that just need to get referred back to the city clerk's office? Is that what we would do? Is that the proper action?
yes. So request to refer it back to the city clerk's office. If you would just raise your right hand.
Okay with that.
Thank you. I think that takes care of most of that business, and we can continue forward with our agenda. So administrative consent items include item 1, the Durham City Council Environmental Affairs Board appointment. Item 2, the Human Relations Commission appointment. Item 3, the Participatory Budgeting Steering Committee appointment. Item 4, Racial Equity Commission appointment. Has been referred back. And departmental items, the City Council resolution in support of Black teens in crisis. I believe that we had some conversation about pulling that item to have some more conversation, so that will hold that one. And item 6 has been dispensed of, so item 7, FY24 Capital Improvement Plan, CIP project closeout and related budget ordinance amendments. Item 8, contract with JP Morgan Chase Bank N.A. for banking services. Item 9, cooperative group purchase contract, service body trucks. Item 10, service agreement for project management consulting services with Turner and Townsend Hury LLC. Item 11, amendment to HUD grant project ordinances. Item 12, 2021 Connect and Protect Law Enforcement Behavioral Health Responses Program Grant and Project Ordinance Superseding Grant Project Ordinance number 15905. Item 13, contract with Pace Analytical Services, LLC, for laboratory services for the Public Works Stormwater Quality Program. Item 14, First Amendment contract with RATP Dev USA, Inc. for the management, operations, and maintenance of the Go Triangle Fixed Route Transit System, CT-19910. Item 15 has been dispensed of, and item 16 is presentations, participatory budgeting, PB Cycle 3 update, 20 minutes, and presentation on affordable housing, Omnibus affordable housing deep dive, 20 minutes, and the updated presentation on bipartisan infrastructure law, BIL, and Inflation Reduction Act, IRL, and others, 20 minutes. And I believe that is all of our agenda items, and only item 5 has been pulled. Okay. Okay. No. So I believe there are some folks online to speak to some items. Yes. And are we doing public comment on the items? Okay. Before we go into our agenda, we're going to move to our citizens matters or resident matters. I believe we have two speakers in the audience, Rachel Salzberg and George Robeson. And then there are 3 online. And I do not have their names. Okay. Okay. Thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes as soon as the clerk has that up. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Salzberg. I've lived in Durham since 2018, and this is my first time giving public comment at a city council meeting. I'm speaking to you today to require that each of you, as my elected representatives, take the only moral stance on the ongoing genocide in Israel-Palestine by adopting and passing the ceasefire resolution submitted by UE 150 and over a dozen community and labor groups. This is not a complicated ask. As the U.S. continues to fund the occupation, while at the same time blocking international votes for an end to the almost unfathomable violence, it is the very least we can do to call for a permanent ceasefire and no aid to Israel. I can share my credentials as a graduate of the Duke Sanford School of Public Policy with a master's in public policy, as a member of the Jewish community who joyfully became a bat mitzvah at 13, and who subsequently had to interrogate her political education around Israel-Palestine, who has taken direct action against the institutions upholding the occupation, and has been called a self-hating Jew for speaking out. But none of that is necessary. Each of you know deep down what is right. Just as we know we need to be paying all of our city workers living wages and ensuring our neighbors have access to affordable, quality health care and safe, warm places to live. Please pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. I truly appreciate your voice in our community. I did want to just pause and just note that I do believe that the mayor's committee met on Monday, and Councilmember Caballero is part of that. Did you want to share any details at all? You don't have to, but I just want to make sure folks do know that the conversation has not stopped, and I do appreciate you being here each and every time to make sure that it doesn't. Thank you.
Madam Presiding Chair, I can provide comment after all citizen or resident matters.
Sounds good.
Good afternoon. George Robeson, Chief Executive Officer of Organization of Dads Incorporated, retained attorneys, retired representative, and veteran administrative director, Larry D. Hall. I'm here trying to see why the Lakewood Apartments has not been renovated by Durham Housing, rather than go and develop a new place for housing. Why not renovate what's already there? Why not? So with that being said, I'm done. I just wanted to let you know that that would be a great idea rather than going out here spending money on a new area of property. And also, this council, the last council, Shules, took my city to hell in the handbasket. Crime rose, used their political power for profit and gain by changing ordinance and then advertising it in the NNO. We're talking about Jillian Johnson. That's what I'm talking about. And collaboration between the now mayor and B.L. Davis. I just can't stand it. I'm Durham's #1 political pundit, pretty much probably the biggest political pundit in America. I made a lot of changes. My whisper reaches far and wide. And if Biden wanted to stop the war, all he had to do was just move the embassy back to Tel Aviv. So I recognize it as a state, because they're occupants. And with that being said, I'm just done. I'm done. Oh, no, I'm not. One more thing. I'm going to be seeking indictments on a few folks on this council for collaboration and using the seats for political power and gain. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Robeson. Appreciate your voice in our community. You texted or emailed it?
I texted it.
Thank you. So we have Betsy Arant. Is that- If we could just make Betsy Arant available.
Madam Presiding Chair, we've had a technical difficulty, and we're working our best to get her online.
Thank you.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry, I'm stepping aside at work, so I will have to leave the meeting directly after my comment. But my name is Elizabeth Arant. I live at 804 Berkeley Street in Durham. I've attended or watched nearly every city council meeting in Durham and Raleigh since the call for ceasefire resolutions began. And over again, I hear the vast majority of constituents in both of these cities calling for a ceasefire, presenting every angle of this argument from international relations to human rights, to anti-racism, to decolonialism. However, when I hear people speak out against a ceasefire, I notice one common theme: Hamas. I'm not going to waste the council's time reminding them of the many carelessly cited claims about Hamas and the October 7th attack that have since been publicly debunked. While this misinformation is troubling, it distracts from a more pressing truth. This has nothing to do with Hamas. There's nothing that Hamas could have done to warrant the relentless mass slaughter of Palestinian civilians, which I shouldn't need to tell you by now are mostly women and children. Exterminating an entire population is not a strategy for eliminating political leaders. It's a strategy for ethnic cleansing. Military experts on all sides have agreed that Hamas will not be eliminated through indiscriminate bombing. In fact, this tactic wouldn't be effective even if it were to take out some of Hamas's leaders through pure chance, as these military experts say that Hamas's power structure is known to be intentionally decentralized. The IDF is well aware of this. It has demonstrated impeccable military strategy and power throughout most of its history, thanks to the support of powerful nations like the US. It knows exactly what it is doing, and the goal of its campaign of genocide is to eradicate the Palestinian people, not to protect its own. Freeing the Israeli hostages is another theme I see among Zionist arguments, always conveniently ignoring the massively disproportionate number of Palestinian hostages being held in Israel, many of them since before October 7th. Yet Netanyahu has made it clear that his priorities do not lie with the safety of the hostages. Any historian or military leader can tell you that hostages are not freed nor protected through the annihilation of civilians. Mayor Williams, you have made it clear over and over at these meetings that your greatest concerns are with your own approval and protecting your career, as you are unwilling to take a stand that will anger a small but vocal contingent of Zionists that come to these meetings to cry Hamas. But I assure you that you will not get out of this pleasing everyone, so I implore you and all of the council to find the courage to put Durham on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your voice in this, in our city. Leslie St. Dry.
Hello. I want to first welcome Councilmember Cook. I'm truly excited to see another leader dedicated to tenant and housing justice on the council. I'm Leslie St. Dre, a Durham resident and member of Mothers for Ceasefire and Durham Beyond Policing, here again to demand that you all announce you will introduce a resolution for a permanent ceasefire in all of historic Palestine, an end to U.S. aid to Israel, a lifting of the siege on Gaza, and the release of all hostages, and an end to the occupation of Palestine. South Africa has laid out an incontrovertible case against Israel for its genocide in Gaza, underscored by over 500 statements of genocidal intent by Israeli officials and political and military leaders. Here's Yoav Gallant, Israel's Minister of Defense. We will eliminate everything. If it doesn't take one day, it will take a week, take weeks, even months. We will reach all places. And let's not forget Netanyahu's statement that they will, quote, thin out Gaza. The same South African lawyers handling this genocide case are now prepping a separate lawsuit against the US and the UK for their complicity in Zionist war crimes. Israel's refusing to let the UN investigators interview doctors about what really happened on October 7th, when there are multiple accounts from survivors and even members of the military about Israel's indiscriminate killing of their own people, which we also see in Gaza. Meanwhile, our senators overwhelmingly refuse to allow the investigation into whether or not our tax dollars are being used for war crimes. This, along with 100 children per day being killed, 250 Palestinians per day total, should provide more than enough information for you to join us in demanding an end to the bloodshed paid for by our money that should be used to save lives and livelihoods here. The mayor has suggested there are two sides to this issue and has chosen a closed-door process. There are no two sides to genocide, and no atrocity is justification for genocide. If, like Biden, he's not ready to stand on the right side of history, we need you, council members, to take the lead and put forward a resolution that states where we as a city stand on these atrocities happening before our very eyes. Your silence is complicity. 80% of Democrats and even the majority of Republican voters want a ceasefire. If you're not yet ready to represent the majority of Durham constituents and use your leverage as our highest public servants to demand an end to the genocide, ethnic cleansing, starvation, dehydration, mutilation, apartheid, and occupation, destroying Palestinians and all of Gaza after 105 days, you should no longer be allowed to represent us, or anyone for that matter. Palestine is a litmus test. You are currently failing in your leadership roles on this. Not one more cent for genocide, not one more second of silence. Let's remember MLK's call for a revolution of values. End militarism and redistribute the wealth to end poverty. Money for workers, families, and housing, not genocide. Please, please introduce a resolution today. Thank you.
Thank you. Your voice is appreciated in our community. And next or last, I have Nastasia Pereira.
Hello. Hello, my name is Nastasia Pereira. I've lived in Durham since 2019. Today is my first time speaking at a city council meeting. I am here to speak today to demand that the city council adopt and pass the draft resolution for a permanent ceasefire and no aid to so-called Israel, submitted by UE 150 and more than a dozen community and labor groups. I am certain that you've heard these figures before, but they are worth repeating. Durham residents are sending $4.3 million in taxes annually to Israel's military, while North Carolinians collectively are sending over $91 million. This has contributed in part to Israel's indiscriminate killing of nearly 30,000 Palestinian civilians since October 7th, including more than 8,000 children. Meanwhile, residents here at home are in need of housing, living wages, at least $25 an hour for our city workers, affordable health care, and of course, no more indiscriminate killing of innocents abroad. I implore you to do the job that we hired you to do and use your leverage as our council members to demand Congress stop using our tax dollars on genocide and ethnic cleansing. Invest in the resources that we need here at home that alleviate violence, like food, healthcare, emotional and mental health support, housing security, fun and affordable after-school and summer programs for our children. Invest in our workers and in our communities here, and divest from war and attacks on Black and Brown people. There is no neutrality regarding genocide, oppression, and injustice. Neutrality means siding with the oppressor, and in this case, that is Israel. This is not a conflict between two nations. This is an ongoing genocide made with clear genocidal intent by an occupying state against an occupied population. I am not advocating for solidarity with one people over another, but rather an affirmation of respect and adherence to the implementation of national and international laws without exception. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinian lives are at imminent risk of death if a lasting ceasefire is not achieved and humanitarian aid is not delivered without delay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to appreciate your voice in our community. I think that's all we have for public comments, and we'll move to our pulled item. But prior to that, I'll just
Thank you. Thank you to all the folks who signed up today. On MLK Day on Monday, the group that the mayor had been wanting to convene finally convened. The next steps is that group will be drafting a resolution that will be brought back to council so that we can take it up. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to appreciate.
I apologize, I don't have a timeline on that.
Thank you. I do want to appreciate you sitting or standing in the gap on making sure that that resolution does move forward. So I do want to appreciate all those in the room and those who've spoken to us over the last few meetings, and just acknowledge that it is definitely a tight tension, but I do think that the voices are loud in our community and we know where we stand. Thank you.
Madam Presiding Chair, can I just add one clarifying piece? The way resolutions, excuse me, it'll be determined whether it's a resolution or a statement, which is different by this council. So just for clarity, a resolution, which is the official document and voice of the city, would need to have 4 votes to be introduced and 4 votes to pass. And I'm just sharing that so that folks can understand some of the mechanics. The statement is less, for lack of a better word, burdensome. It does not require those official motions.
Thank you.
Can you confirm we need 4 votes to bring it forward, or just 2?
Correct. So our process around resolutions, since it's an actual official document and it's a, introduced into record, et cetera, is that to be introduced in front of the body, since it's the entire body speaking in one voice, it has to have four votes to be introduced and then four votes to pass.
Gotcha, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will move to our polled. I'm sorry, item number 5, resolution in support of Black teens in crisis.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Chair. I'm just pulling this item. This is the mayor's item, and so he is not here to speak on that. And so my request, I guess, is to potentially put it on GBA to allow council members opportunity to send feedback via email or whichever way they want to do it to be incorporated. This is actually a great example of how a resolution process works. So that is essentially my request, is that it not be placed on consent since he's not here to speak on it. And then that allows council members to provide feedback directly to him on any language changes that they want. And then we can just take it up on GBA, I guess, whatever, February 5th, I think is our meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're moving that to GBA. And that moves us along to our presentations. Item number 16 for participatory budgeting.
Madam Presiding Chair, can we go ahead and settle the agenda? Is that an okay thing? So that's our last task that we actually need a vote on, and then we can move to presentation. So if we do lose quorum, it doesn't impact anything.
Okay. I'm wondering on if we need to add anything. I guess so. Yes, we can move forward to settle the agenda then. So that's items. You want to say each one? You want to settle agenda?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just don't want to forget, and then we don't have 4 folks.
While you're getting that together. Okay. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Chair. I do have for your upcoming council meeting for consent, items 1 through 3, and items 7 through 14, item 5 for GBA.
Do we need to go ahead and settle the appointments before we do that? Because you're saying item 1 through 3. So I'm going to check with the clerk on that.
Yes.
Presiding Chair, I do have a report on the nominations for council. Number 1, the Durham City County Environmental Affairs Board, there is a tie currently. 3 votes for Campbell and 3 votes for Artabane. And I was wondering if anyone wanted to shift their votes.
I will note that the Durham City County Environmental Affairs Board did submit a recommendation for Artabane. And so if anyone would like to move from Campbell to Artabane, that was the recommendation.
The only council member in the chamber at the moment would be Councilmember Rist. Would you like to shift your vote?
No, ma'am. What was the only member that was what?
The only member in the chamber who can shift their vote is you.
Oh, gotcha. I guess I'm also wondering about the seventh vote. Is that, if we only have 6 votes, do we have to, and we don't resolve, does it go back to the clerk?
Councilmember, we need 4 votes for nominations. And right now, there's a 3-3 split.
Right, I'm just wondering if we can keep it open until that seventh vote is cast.
That would be Mayor Williams, and he is out of town. Unless you want to hold this to the next council meeting and put it on GBA.
Yeah, when we do that.
It's up to you.
So we're holding item 1 open for GBA.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number 2, Human Relations Commission. The unanimous consent is for Asaya Robertson. The Participatory Budgeting Steering Committee appointment, unanimous vote for Rosemary James, and item 4 has been referred back to the city clerk's office.
Thank you. You want to resettle?
So now I will set the agenda subsequent to the council deliberation on the agenda items. So now we have for consent, items 2 and 3, items 7 through 14. For GBA, we have items 1 and item 5, and that's it. That's it.
Thank you, Madam Manager. And if I could get a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have to approve the agenda, right? Okay, call for a motion. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Risk, I heard from Councilmember Risk motion, and second from Councilmember Caballero. All in favor, raise your right hand. So we're all set, and we'll move to our presentations. The first presentation is the Participatory Budgeting PB Cycle 3 update. And I'm turning it over to our staff. Ms. Ortiz.
Yeah. So good afternoon, members of council, and special welcome to Council Member Cook on your first day today. And so my name is Carmen Ortiz. I am the Budget Engagement Manager overseeing participatory budgeting. And my colleague here, Fallon Thompson, is the Senior Budget Engagement Analyst. And we are here today to provide you with an update on our 3rd cycle of participatory budgeting, which I will be referring as PB, as well as to announce our winning projects. Okay. And so before I get started, I'd like to take a minute to introduce you to our team. I'm very proud to have this team by my side. PB Cycle 3 would not be as incredible as we believe it's been without the hard work and passion of my team. And starting with Andrew Holland right here, he is the Assistant Budget Director overseeing the House of Performance and Innovation in the Budget Office. Myself, Carmen, and my wonderful colleague Fallon that I am very excited to work along with. We also had Samantha Pace. She is our Strategy and Engagement Analyst intern. Samantha primarily focused on analyzing and working with our data. Melissa Amwabank and Matthew Ken were our design interns. They created all of the renderings that, with the visuals that went on the ballot. They also supported us with media, website management, and a lot of community engagement over the summer. And we have Nathan Aracchio here. He is our data analyst, and Nathan focused on data management and created a lot of the graph that you'll see in this presentation. All right, and so this is the agenda for this presentation. I will take a few minutes to talk about participatory budgeting, primarily for those of you that are not familiar with what PB is. I will touch very briefly on PB Cycle 1 and PB Cycle 2, but the meat of this presentation is to talk about, PB Cycle 3. So I will touch on the framework, the different steps, idea collection, proposal development, voting, and then Fallon will talk to you a little bit about our voting demographics, as well as the winning projects and the next steps. All right, and so PB is a democratic process that allows residents to participate in the city's budget process. And so here are generally sort of the steps of what it is. Usually it starts with an idea collection phase, and this is where residents share ideas on projects they would like to see the city funded. The second phase is the proposal development and vetting phase. So this is when residents or community members work alongside our technical department as well as city staff to look at all the ideas that were submitted and vet them for feasibility. The next step is a project that moved through the proposal development phase, then they go on to voting, and residents get to cast their vote for their priority or favorite projects. And finally, it's the implementation phase. So this is when winning projects are actually built and funded. And finally, there's an evaluation and planning phase. So this is when we internally analyze the data, reflect on the process, and prepare for the next cycle. And so why does PB matter? And so PB increases civic engagement. It allows residents the opportunity to participate in their city's decision-making process. It also builds stronger and more collaborative relationships between residents, government, and community organizations. And so our budget delegates, got to work with, us, the city staff, as well as our technical departments for over 6 months, vetting project ideas, learning, what it takes to build a sidewalk, learning what the cost of these things. And so it's pretty exciting, a learning opportunity for the residents and even us as a staff. It also builds a more inclusive political participation, especially by historically and marginalized communities. And so our residents who otherwise would not be engaged in government get to submit ideas and work with the city to develop ideas. And finally, and my favorite part is that it empowers people to decide together how to spend public money. And so community members from all walks of life, different neighborhoods and background and experiences come together to look at project ideas, develop these ideas, and make decisions together to improve their communities. And so PB started in Durham in 2018 when our Durham City Council approved the guidelines and approved $2.4 million in funding and appointed a PB steering committee to establish the goals and support the administrations. And so generally, PB funds projects that are related to infrastructure, technological improvements, and community enhancements. The $2.4 million in our first cycle of PB was divided amongst the 3 wards. So each ward had $800,000. Any city Durham residents and all students 13 years or old can participate in the process. PB Cycle 2 was a little bit different. It started in 2020. As you'll know, there was a pandemic, and so this was a very different cycle. And so in order to skip on PB, our Durham Council approved $1 million in funding to support the communities most affected by COVID. And so we started our work in PB Cycle 3 in the spring of 2022. During this time, we spent significant time reviewing the recommendations from the third-party evaluation conducted by North Carolina Central University. We had meetings with our internal department that were part of our PB Cycle 1, and we also met with cities across the country to learn from their PB cycles. Our goal was to learn from what we did in PB Cycle 1 and build on the best practices so that we were able to build a more innovative PB Cycle 3. And so we onboarded a brand new PB steering committee, some of which are here. We onboarded a new PB steering committee who decided on 3 different goals. And so the goals was to engage more diverse populations, to implement projects that serve the most underserved and marginalized communities in Durham, and to increase community engagement in the decision-making process of the city. And so additionally, our PB Cycle 3 reverted back to the original scope of PB, which is to fund one-time capital projects on city property, DHA property, or private land donated. And so our 15-member PB steering committee, under the leadership of Axel Herrera, Kenneth Webb, and Angela Jimerson, decided to move away from funding projects based on ward, as we did in PB Cycle 1, and set a goal that 60% of the projects fall in a geographic area based on equity. And so our PB steering committee worked with our DataWorks and our Equity and Inclusion Department to determine which were the focus areas for the parameters of this map. And so the 3 focus areas that they voted on was communities or neighborhoods with high percentage people of color, with household incomes under $48,000, and where high percentage of residents take public transportation. Some additional innovations for our PB Cycle 3, we extended our timeline to allow for planning and adaptability and more time for a proposal development phase so that we were able to incorporate more community engagement in the process. And so some of the areas, some of the additional changes that we did, we expanded our equity matrix. So we did have an equity and impact matrix in PB Cycle 1. However, we expanded it so that we can incorporate, so that our budget delegates were able to use data from Neighborhood Compass to score projects. We also expanded our impact matrix so that we were able to score projects analyzing the population that would be served. Something that was also very unique to PB Cycle 3 was that we incorporated co-design. And so this allowed our design interest to work with our residents to design the projects. And so in the spring, once we start implementing the projects, we're going to go back to the community and do additional community engagement so that residents are part of designing the projects that are going to go in their communities. And so some of the other recommendations that came from our evaluation from North Carolina Central and conversations with other cities was to incorporate more appreciation in the process. And so we were absolutely happy to do that. And so in the summer of 23, we hosted a rooftop celebration in which we invited all of our budget delegates, our technical department, our PB steering committee members, our budget director joined us, and some of you members of council joined us. And this was really a neat opportunity for us to thank our budget delegates and all our volunteers for their hard work. And so our budget delegates were with us for about 6 months, including about 3 weeks of training before we started idea collection. And then they spend time going out into the community, speaking with residents about the projects, doing research for the project, as well as meeting with their technical staff. And so we wanted to thank them and appreciate them for their hard work and their families, of course. And so that was pretty exciting. Some of the additional things that were pretty exciting about PB Cycle 3 was that we were able to partner with our city's innovation team, who designed 3 ballots for us and then took it for user testing. And so right before we kicked off voting, we did a user testing event, so we were able to test our ballots before we rolled them out. So our innovation team tested both the paper options as well as the online ballot. And here I'm just going to take a few minutes to just kind of run you through PB Cycle 3. And so idea collection took place, as I said, the fall of 2022, when we collected over 600 ideas. So again, we went into the community, spoke to residents, and gathered over 600 project ideas. In the spring, proposal development took place. We had over 260 ideas that moved onto the proposal development process and were reviewed by our budget delegates. Community engagement took place over the summer. So what we did over the summer is we took all of the project ideas that had moved forward. So the project ideas that moved in the proposal development process and moved on for feasibility, equity, and impact, we took them back to the community so that we have conversations with the residents that would be most impacted by these projects. So we asked questions like, if this project's implemented in your neighborhood, would you support this project? Do you think this project would impact your community? And so the projects that moved on into voting were projects that, again, moved for feasibility, equity, impact, and had high support from the residents that would be impacted by these projects. And then these projects went onto the ballot for resident voting. And so right now we are in the implementation phase, and so we will be incorporating the co-design in the next few months so that, again, as we start sort of implementing and working with our technical departments on these projects, our residents will provide us more information on how they would like to see these projects implemented. And so what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is sort of touch on all the different phases, starting with idea collection, and provide you with a little bit of the demographic, as well as the proposal development and voting. And so during the idea collection, as I've mentioned, we had over 600 ideas submitted. Most common ideas were around sidewalk, parks, security, and lighting. And so we prioritize our engagement in the hard to reach community. So we understand that there were communities that in order to hear from them, we had to put our boots on the ground and go to these communities. And so our goal was for everyone in Durham to participate in the process. And so what you see here are the demographic information from the 600 ideas collected over the fall of 2022. And so the data shows that the majority of residents that participated were people of color, and the highest percentage of participants were those under the $10,000 yearly incomes. And here what you see is the data details for the engagement that we led over the summer. So these were the residents that, again, we had an opportunity to speak to over the summer and gather feedback about how the projects would impact them. And although although about 20% did not complete the race and ethnicity questions and about 30% of the residents skipped income, the data shows that there was a good representation from residents across race and income. And so, as I've mentioned very briefly, projects go from being submitted by residents in idea collection, then through the proposal development phase before they go into voting. And so we were 629 ideas were submitted. Out of those 629 ideas, there were over 100 comments made about these ideas that were submitted. Approximately 271 of those ideas advanced to the proposal development phase. And so our budget delegates, who are volunteer residents, were able to work with our technical staff to vet these for feasibility, equity, and impact. We were very excited to work with our budget delegates. Our budget delegates we had a very diverse group across race, gender, age, education, and background. And so these budget delegates worked to do the research, vet these projects, and do the scoring. So all this came from our budget delegates and not us. And so generally the way that it started is our technical departments provided with an initial scoring on feasibility. So they basically scored for cost estimate, so they were able to score if a project is way above the cost estimate or around. They also provided us with information about, is this project idea within the city limits, which is very important. Is it within the scope of the work that the city can do? And so the projects that move forward would then continue to be analyzed by our budget delegates. And so the first thing our budget delegates did was provide an equity score. And so just keep in mind that every project was scored by at least 3 different budget delegates. And so our goal was that every budget, had multiple people score it. And so our budget delegates looked at quantitative data to identify underserved neighborhoods. So they looked at questions like, what is the median household income in this neighborhood or community? What is the percent of transit ridership? What is the percent of youth population and percentage of people of color? Is this a food desert? And so our goal was to analyze equity using multiple data points. Our budget delegates then scored projects for impact. So they did a qualitative analysis to determine the proposal's impact. So we thought about how will this project potentially impact our residents. So they asked questions. Does this provide a missing resource? If so, what is the condition of this resource? Will this project serve just one group of people or citywide? And so they asked a number of questions so we're able to determine who and how will our residents be impacted by the projects. And here are the 10 projects that made it to the ballot. We're very excited about the projects that made it to the ballot. They reflect our residents and their priorities. The hard work of our budget delegates who spend so much time analyzing over 271 different projects. And so what you can see here is that our projects range from parks and recreation to safety to arts and culture, and they also serve residents across the city. So they're not concentrated in one specific area, but they're all around the city and really serve different community members, from the youth to the elder, and different interest points. And so we're very excited about these projects over here. And before we move on to the project and the data, I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about our voting process. One of the things that it's very special and unique about Durham is our commitment to equity. And so unlike other cities who only use sort of like an online platform, at the city of Durham, we were committed to also use a paper ballot to ensure that every single resident in the city of Durham have an opportunity to vote without any barriers. And so our paper ballots we primarily used when we were out in the community. And so when we were out, canvassing our neighborhood, when we were at the Department of Health and Human Services, or at the Durham bus station, we went to the Durham County Jail, this is what we had. We took this into the community with us. Now, our online ballot was more accessed by those residents who had, the comfort of their iPads and phones and the comfort of their home. And these were the residents that accessed our ballots via newsletters and e-blast advertisements through our large social media presence, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and so on, and information sent out from our communications departments. We were also very excited to work with Durham Public School Administration to ensure that students' voice are also heard through the PB process. And so we worked very closely with Durham Public School administrators and teachers so that our students were able to participate in the process. All right, perfect. Then I'm going to go ahead and Fallon's going to join you and talk a little bit more about the projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Good afternoon. I am one of the residents impacted by the Duke Energy power outage, so if I sound and look a little bit frazzled, it's probably because of that. So thank you for bearing with me. We are excited to highlight our efforts thus far for PB Cycle 3. We had over 12,000 votes, with 2,886 of those collected from our Durham Public School students. About half of our ballots were collected online, and about half were collected in person using our paper ballots. We continue to try to keep PB Cycle 3 community-led. We hired 7 paid volunteers that helped us with outreach during voting, and again, we focus on our underserved communities. Twice weekly during voting, you can find us at the Durham bus station and or at the Department of Health and Human Services collecting votes from residents. We spent time canvassing our undeserved neighborhoods and our target neighborhoods, including Bragtown, Merrickmore, Lyon Park. Also, we collected over 200 votes from our justice-involved individuals at the Durham County Jail. Before we go into our voting demographics, we wanted to show the racial composition of the city of Durham and Durham Public Schools. For the city of Durham, we have about 36% African American and Black, 44% white, and 14% Latino. We want to show the demographics for Durham Public Schools since we did not, as Carmen mentioned, ask any demographic questions from our student ballots. For DPS, we have about 40% Black or African American, 19% white, and 34% Latino. The median income for Durham is a little more than $70,000. The data we collected from PB voting is representative of Durham. This slide shows our demographic breakdown for both our paper and our online ballots. Our racial demographic information here shows that most of our voters were people of color. Income, unfortunately, is not a question that's frequently answered on surveys, and our data showed here that 22% of our voters left it unanswered. Up next, I'm going to give you a breakdown of what our online and our paper ballot demographics looks like. Here is our online ballot. We expected our, our online demographics to show residents with higher incomes, and our data also reports that 66% of our online voters were white. Here it shows our paper ballot demographics. We spent considerable time prioritizing our marginalized and underserved neighborhoods. We primarily use our paper ballots in these areas, and we're proud that 66% of our paper ballot voters were people of color. You see here that 15% of the voters did skip that race question, yet we are confident that those voters were also people of color because we spent time gathering these paper ballots from places like the Durham bus station, the Department of Health and Human Services, when we canvassed our neighborhood, our target neighborhoods, and when we went to the Durham Housing Authority properties. It's also fair to say that these voters were on the go at the Durham bus station or at the Department of Health and Human Services, and that may be the reason why we see that 15% race question unanswered. Moving on quickly to income, again, it's a question that's not very popular on surveys, and our data shows that 36% of the voters skipped it, It could be that these voters in those areas may have been of lower income and may not have been confident sharing that information with us. Here, I want to highlight our student ballot demographics. We reached out to all of Durham Public School high schools and middle schools. These are the ones you see on the graphs that were represented and participated in PB Cycle 3 voting. We had 16 out of the 17 high schools participate and 8 out of the 9 middle schools. Okay, now for the reason why we're all here today. I would like to present to you the PB Cycle 3 winning projects. 77% of the locations of our winning projects are within the target areas that Carmen mentioned earlier. Our #1 project is the security measures at Durham Housing Authority. This project by far was the most popular project across all of our ballots. That's our paper, our online, and our student ballots. The estimated project budget for this is $110,000. Our #2 project is the lighting at parks with an estimated budget of $887,000, a little over that. Our #3 project is the sustainable improvements to parks with an estimated project budget of $110,000. Our #4 project is the pedestrian safety on East Trinity Avenue with an estimated project budget of $990,000. And last but not least, our #5 project is the teen equipment at rec centers coming in a little under $85,000. Let's take a little bit of time to look at a few details on each of our 5 winning projects. This is the security measures at Durham Housing Authority homes. This project will install cameras, deadbolt locks, and lighting to benefit more than 200 families in the Cornwallis Road community and 80 seniors at Price Steel Place. Our Lighting and Parks project will add lights to the basketball courts at Maureen Road Park, the soccer fields at Holton Career Center, and the parking lot at Edison Johnson Rec Center. The Sustainable Improvements to Park projects will install water bottle filling stations, bike repair stations, and solar power cellular charging stations at several city parks across Durham, including Lyon Park and Merrickmore Park. The pedestrian safety on East Trinity Avenue project will install pedestrian safety and traffic calming measures such as sidewalks, crosswalks, and signage along East Trinity and at the intersection with Avondale Avenue. This is our teen equipment at rec centers. The locations for this project include the Durham Teen Center at Lyon Park, Holton Career and Resource Center, Walltown Rec Center, W.D. Hill Rec Center, and Weaver Street Rec Center. This project will invest in our teen populations by upgrading the hardware and software equipment at those rec center locations. We are excited about our winning projects and are looking forward to their implementation. We continue to incorporate evaluation through each phase of PB and are very thankful to our Department of Equity and Inclusion for helping us to strengthen the equity in our process. Innovation is the bread and butter of PB. Our innovation team will run 2 studies about participatory budgeting, one about voters' impressions of the PB projects and the other to examine if voting in PB builds trust in government. We are also glad to report that North Carolina Central University will perform a third-party evaluation of PB Cycle 3 that is expected to be completed by the summer of this year. Participatory budgeting would not be possible without all of our supporters and those that help us out throughout this cycle. We are so very glad for our PB Steering Committee, all of our budget delegates, the technical departments that helped us so much, our community partners and organizations, the Department of Health and Human Services, Durham Housing Authority, the Durham County Sheriff's Office, Durham Public Schools, Kids Voting Durham, and all our resident and community volunteers. We would not be able to do this without you. if there are any of our PB steering committee members or any of our budget delegates that are in the audience at this time, would you please stand so that we can recognize you? Thank you all very much for your help. At this time, we will entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you for the great presentation, lots of details and exciting projects. Looking to my colleagues, if you have questions, Councilmember Caballero.
I don't really have tons of questions. I just want to say thank you. I was pretty close and personal as one of the liaisons to PB, and I know it was a huge community-wide effort. I'm glad that I know the goal was at least 12,000 votes. I'm glad we met the goal. I know that PB1 was 10,000, so that's a pretty good improvement. And I'm, of course, going to shout out Riverside for the responses from the high school Roll Pirates Roll, and just say that I look forward to the next round. I know that there's going to be a lot of lessons learned. We learn each round, and I just also want to commend Councilmember Johnson, former Councilmember Johnson. This was one of her big ideas that she brought to council and something that she advocated for fiercely, and each round gets better, and so just want to shout her out because Durham wouldn't have this without that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Risk.
Sure, I want to echo those comments and just thank you for the presentation and all the excitement around I can't even say it, participatory budgeting. Great projects, great involvement in the community, so it's a wonderful program. And again, I also want to appreciate former Councilmember Johnson for bringing this forward. I just had two questions. So one, and I also appreciate the thoughtfulness about doing an evaluation each round to sort of figure out what we're learning, how that can improve the program. So could you say more about what you learned from the second round evaluation and how that influenced the sort of design of phase or cycle 3?
Sure. So the first PB cycle 1 was evaluated. The second one, we did not do an evaluation for
Then
this.
on one, okay, yeah.
Okay, so there was, North Carolina Central did a very extensive recommendation, and there were lots of things. So some of the things was an extended timeline so that we would spend more time, for example, during the proposal development phase and the engagement phases. So that was kind of one of the big things. Also, and incorporate appreciation. PB is a lot of work because there's a lot of engagement. So that's one of the things that really came out to sort of have more time so that you're not sort of, so one of the big differences is in PB Cycle 1, we were in line with the budget calendar year, which was very tight. And so with extending the timeline, we were able to spend more time during the proposal development phase, which was a little bit over 6 months, as well as continue to do community engagement, which is the key. So one thing that was very different between those two cycles is that before we took the projects to the ballot, we went back to the community and asked them, do you support these project ideas? And we had 2 projects that actually did change based on that community engagement. Any additional changes that I can think off the top of my head were to continue to strengthen and develop the relationship with the community. And so that's also part of why we incorporated community engagement in the entire process. So in other cycles, we didn't continue the engagement in the implementation process. And so right now, we will be doing more engagement as we implement every project throughout the process.
Great. I appreciate, again, the thoughtfulness and the sort of the creativity and the sort of intention about those evaluations and how that influences the next round. Second question, I want to echo Councilwoman Caballero's comments about Riverside Pirates, Roll Pirates Roll. But the question I had about that was, so clearly Riverside had way more participation than other schools, and I think one of the middle schools did as well. Why is that? Is that just because there's a person in that school that really makes it happen there, or what's the secret sauce to make it a little more engaged across all high schools and middle schools?
It's a great question, and so we spent a lot of time working with Durham Public Schools. You know, we reached out to administration as well as principals, and so the ones that got more participation were the ones that we were able to have more, have more principals and staff receptive to it. And so, some principals, for example, like Riverside, they just let us in and we spent a lot of time. Other schools weren't as receptive to that. And so I think it comes down to, hopefully in the next round, we'll have more schools that are willing to give us more time.
Great, thanks again.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I would just add that I appreciate the demographic information. I think it's important that we highlight how we go out of our way to get that type of demographic information, and half of them being through paper surveys is really important to keep in mind so that we don't lose that paper touch, so to speak. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to echo the council members that I thought y'all did an excellent job, and that was an excellent presentation. You answered my question as part of your answer to Councilmember Rist, but I want to say to echo Councilmember Freeman that I think that the paper ballot initiative was really intentional, really important, and I appreciate that. And y'all spoke specifically to folks who are incarcerated, and I thought that that was also a great addition to this, and I'm glad that those voices got heard. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, just real quick, when would the next, we'll obviously be evaluating into the spring, so would that line up again with the municipal election in '25? Am I right on that timeline?
I think so, because we would kick off in the spring of 2025, so idea collection would potentially be in the fall of 2025. But, that's things we can always have more internal conversations if there's kind of a challenge with that.
Yeah, no, one of the things that I noted was that I saw folks, volunteers at polling sites, and I thought that was a very brilliant move because folks were already, they're voting, and so to see PB people tabling, I think, well, you're already voting for this other thing, yeah, sure, I should continue my civic duty, and I think it'll give us that kind of runway to really incorporate. I did a kids voting event at Student U with folks. I think I did 2 separate ones around PB voting, and one of the things that I've always really appreciated is how eager our students are and our youth are to vote, which is, we purposely designed 13 and over for a reason. And so to watch those kids actually click that, oh, like this thing that I'm voting for, I actually get a say. And so many times our youth don't get a say. And so having watched that and watching them make the connection, obviously the teen equipment was a big win. And interestingly, so was the security measures. Like it was interesting to see folks say, yeah, everyone should feel safe. And these were 15 and 16-year-olds. So I thought that was really an interesting thing to observe. So again, so much respect and gratitude for y'all, and I'm excited. I know it's a lot of work, but I'm excited for PB3.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. And we're moving along to item number 17, the presentation on affordable housing omnibus, affordable housing deep dive. And I'll just give a little introduction. I appreciate the clerk on submitting the memo for me. I just want to make sure that they can get that presentation pulled up. So I'll start with just a little bit more background information to say that this is a cumulative look at the work from the last year of the council and presentations that we received from residents in the community, experts, and advocates all throughout fall of 2022 through the spring of 2023. Our presenters today are our interns who were brought in under Mayor O'Neill. And I know that this was meant to be a fall presentation of 2023, and it's come up in January. We're finally here, but Bryce McKeel is a 4th-generation Durhamite and homeowner raising 2 5th-generation Durhamite girls with his wife, Rosemary. He comes from a real estate family, and his parents have owned and operated Apple Realty on Guest Road for nearly 25 years. And Joe Wilson is a master's student in the Department of City and Regional Planning at UNC Chapel Hill, specializing in housing and community development. And I'm going to turn it over to you two gentlemen to bring us through the omnibus.
All right. Thank you very much. So yes, we are the mayoral interns. I'm Bryce McKeel, and this is Joe Wilson. So in 2022, the Durham City Council began deep research into the city's housing issues. The council heard 11 presentations from local experts and a number of city departments and local organizations. Former Mayor O'Neill asked us to compile the information from those presentations and compile it into one easily accessible place. So we have chosen to make an omnibus available of all of the relevant information from those presentations. And this will be going on the city's website so that it is available to the public online. So in the 20 minutes we have today, today's presentation is not a replacement for those 11 presentations, but it should serve as a helpful recap of that information. So we've divided those presentations into 5 broad categories that we're going to go over today: income and affordability, private development, subsidized and public housing, evictions, and finally homelessness. So with that, take it away, Joe.
All right, so just to bear in mind that all of this is taking place amid rapid population growth, especially among wealthier residents moving into Durham. This has put a lot of upward pressure on rent and home prices, and is really one of the driving factors behind the affordability crisis that we see. But it's also a product of a long history of housing conditions and policies. We unfortunately don't really have time to get into those at this presentation, but they're important to bear in mind as we consider the present situation. There are different approaches toward remedying the housing situation. Some are based on private practices, others on more public intervention. But what we're going to see across all presentations is that no one solution exists, no silver bullet to solve all of these issues. But with that in mind, we're going to move on to the first major topic, which is housing affordability. So to paraphrase a comment from Councilmember Middleton during the presentations, there can't really be a conversation about housing affordability without it also being about income. There are two sides to affordability. One is how much housing costs. The other is how much households can pay. So we often hear that households shouldn't spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Reginald Johnson, for the community development presentation, said that for individuals, that's financial advice, but for the city, it becomes a question of how we can actually make that viable for everyone, how we can have safe and decent housing available at that 30% income level, even for those with lower incomes. So for the purposes of programs using money from HUD, income levels are defined in relation to the area median income. There's a little bit of nuance to that, but generally you can see the income levels here for a given household size. So we just have a couple of graphs showing trends in income and rent. The first one comes from the DataWorks presentation, and it shows a stratification of income. You see higher income jobs becoming even more higher income, and lower income jobs becoming even more lower income in relation to that median rent figure in the middle. The second one is from the Triangle Apartment Association. This shows rent from 2017 to mid-2023. As you can see, there's a very large spike during 2021 and the first half of 2022, which leveled off during the second half of 2022, but is still elevated well above where it was a few years ago. And then this is a graph from that community development presentation showing how renting versus ownership is distributed at different income levels. A big takeaway here is that home ownership doesn't really become viable until you get up close to that area median income level. As Reginald Johnson pointed out, that can make it really hard to save wealth at the lower income levels. For a lot of people, home equity is the main form of savings, and that can't really happen when you can't afford a down payment in the first place. So for what the city can actually do regarding this situation, North Carolina is a Dillon's rule state. That means that cities only have certain powers allocated them by the state. So Durham cannot require the inclusion of affordable housing in developments. But the city does have a special charter authority which lets it incentivize housing through things like density bonuses or other incentives of value, which the Attorney's Office and the Planning Department have been looking into.
All right, so briefly on private development, we have a chart here. Credit to Sarah Young for this infographic. And this chart describes the development process. So development begins by asking whether something is allowed by the zoning. So for example, if I wanted to build a workforce housing option like a duplex, all I have to do is check the zoning, and if it's residential compact, urban, or suburban multifamily, it's allowed by right, and I can build it without special permission. If the current zoning does not permit the proposed development, then the owner or developer has to seek rezoning through council. So this requires a site plan, which can be expensive. And together with application fees, realtor fees, land costs, a developer can easily spend $65,000 or more before getting approval to break ground. Someone looking to build a home might be prepared to spend that kind of money, but if rezoning is at the discretion of the planning department, then this investment becomes a bit of a gamble. So risking $65,000 only to be told no is not a risk that smaller developers are willing to make. Most of the local developers are going to stick to by right development options, which often don't include small multifamily housing. So if we're going to encourage workforce housing built by local developers, it's recommended by the Triangle Apartment Association and the Durham Regional Association of Realtors that affordable options be made available by right. So at the time of writing, there is a new development ordinance being written that could allow for such housing. This is unfortunately outside the scope of this project, but we do have high hopes for that undertaking. So development has been occurring at a rapid rate over the past couple of years, but so far for reasons that are entirely clear, density bonuses and other incentives haven't been very effective at encouraging smaller local developers. Most of that development has been by large corporate out-of-state developers. But a strong pipeline of apartment deliveries has more or less caught up with population growth, and as we saw from that earlier chart, rents increases have seemed to level off. This is good news that it has seemed to hit an equilibrium, but of course the bad news is that they've stabilized above area median income affordability. I don't have a whole lot of time to talk much about environmental concerns, so for more information on that particular topic, I would point curious listeners to the Lick Creek water quality presentation. So finally, for this section, I'm going to get into a few recommendations. Most of these came from the Triangle Apartment Association and from the experts chosen by the Durham Regional Association of Realtors. The first recommendation was the most common one. Bring back the housing roundtables. These discussions brought together relevant stakeholders from several different backgrounds to look at housing situation from all angles. Another recommendation from the Apartment Association was to invest in Affordable Housing Preservation Fund to buy and finance affordable housing. The Durham Affordable Housing Loan Fund already exists to do this, but funds are currently exhausted. I believe they exhausted in 2022. Another suggestion was to streamline development process for ADUs and, when appropriate, loosening some land use restrictions that could allow for more land where multiplex units can be built by right. And finally, there was about $2 million from the 2019 Affordable Housing Bond for ADUs that went unused. There was talk of reallocating that money. I don't know what happened to it, but that could be used to help incentivize ADUs that promise more affordable rents.
All right, so from the sort of private development picture, we're going to look now at subsidized and public housing. This is mainly through the Durham Housing Authority, which gets funding from HUD, and so it has to use those HUD income criteria, which can be kind of strict. So at the time of the DHA presentation, about 9,000 people were using at least one of their services, and there were thousands more on waiting lists. These residents had an average income of $11,000 a year, paid an average of $300 a month in rent. About a quarter of them were employed, and around 40% were under 18, 15% seniors, and among overall, about 40% had a disabling condition. So the first DHA program that we're going to look at is Section 8, the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This works by giving residents vouchers to find apartments in the private market. The tenant pays 30% of their income as rent, and then the DHA pays the remainder. This is the Housing Authority's largest program, but it does face some challenges. One of them is that a lot of landlords don't accept tenants who use Section 8 vouchers, which can make it hard for voucher holders to find an apartment. Another thing is that the Housing Authority limits what is considered reasonable rent. That's because they have to pay a lot of that rent. They have the authority to raise that number, which would open up more apartments for voucher holders. But the flip side is that it would reduce the number of vouchers that they could afford to provide. And they'd really like to be able to provide as many vouchers as they can because there's a huge demand. They cap the wait list and only open it up periodically, but it's estimated that around 10,000 households are looking for Section 8 vouchers. The other major program is public housing, which has a pretty bad reputation in the United States. To paraphrase an exchange during the DHA presentation, public housing is essentially a failed model in the United States because of chronic underfunding by Congress. Still, a lot of people in Durham use public housing and want to use it. The Housing Authority has around 1,700 units, almost all of which are occupied, and over 5,000 people on waiting lists. But in 2018, it was designated a troubled agency because of poor building quality, and the repairs that it needs are a lot more expensive than the grant that HUD gave them. Mr. Scott estimated that the repairs would cost $50 million over 5 years, and the grant was only for $15 million. It's one of those things that compounds over time. When repairs have to be deferred, they end up getting more and more expensive. And as we mentioned, it's a national issue. Mr. Scott cited a HUD statement that nationwide, HUD had underfunded public housing by $76 billion over its history. One strategy that DHA is following moving forward is utilizing more mixed income housing. You can see this in the plans for the DD&P development downtown. So on to some recommendations. The first one is finding a way to get more landlords to accept those Section 8 vouchers, whether that's through incentives or as a contingency for city funding. There's also a need for partners who can provide things like childcare and job readiness training for people using DHA services. And a couple of the presentations noted that staffing shortages have caused administrative difficulties. The Association of Realtors suggested partnering with local colleges to build a pipeline for city jobs, administrative jobs. And the Association of Realtors and DHA had a couple of suggestions as far as reforming down payment assistance and utilizing Section 8 vouchers for mortgage assistance instead of just rent.
Okay, moving on to evictions. Evictions are unfortunately back to pre-pandemic levels, according to DataWorks. The Apartment Association and the eviction diversion programs talked on the causes of evictions. Not surprisingly, non-payment of rent is far and away the most common cause. This can mean as little as a single month, and the Apartment Association made a point to clarify that most evictions are a matter of $1,000 or less. The eviction process is usually very quick. The trial is often under 15 minutes. 90 to 95% of tenants are unrepresented, and almost all judgments are default judgments as the tenants don't show up to court. The eviction diversion program works to try and prevent eviction judgments and to avoid filings in the first place. They keep an attorney and a paralegal on site at court to provide counsel to tenants facing eviction. And eviction diversion raises defenses, finds facts, and sometimes just buys tenants enough time to find another place to stay. So the eviction diversion program and the Apartment Association both had similar recommendations for minimizing evictions in Durham. Since most evictions, as I said, occur for $1,000 or less in unpaid rents, a little bit of emergency rental assistance can go a long way in helping these tenants keep their homes. Durham did have an emergency rental assistance fund for this earlier in the pandemic, but funds were exhausted in 2022, and now there are only a few scattered means of assistance through social services and other nonprofits. The second recommendation is to increase funding for legal aid, the legal wing of the eviction diversion program. According to legal aid, each lawyer was paid at a rate of about $60,000 per year and provided representation for 120 households each year. Legal aid says their attorneys have historically assisted 85 of those families in keeping their home and allowed them to stay there, which at about $500 per family served seems to be a very cost-effective way of preventing these people from entering our homelessness continuum of care.
All right, and that brings us to our last topic, homelessness. Like with income levels, HUD has some specific categories here, which you can see below. The continuum of care is a network which works to prevent homelessness and to care for those who are experiencing homelessness. The presentation by Colin Davis went into some detail on how roles and funding are distributed in Durham's continuum of care, but broadly it provides a few types of services. The front door is entry point, formerly called coordinated entry. That's where everybody who's entering the system comes in. Street outreach is a program to help connect those who need services with entry point. Like we said, a goal of the continuum of care is to avoid instances of homelessness in the first place. That's what diversion is about. Things like connecting people with nearby family or friends who can let them stay until they're back on their feet. Emergency shelters are temporary and only for the literally homeless category from HUD. There is some permanent supportive housing available, but it's only for those who are both chronically homeless and who have a disabling condition. Otherwise, the Rapid Rehousing Program provides temporary financial support to help households move from homelessness to a stable housing situation. There are, of course, a number of challenges facing the continuum of care. Some of them are going to sound familiar. Some of them are more unique to homelessness. The first one is just limited capacity and funding. There are a lot of variables in how long it can take for somebody to find permanent housing, and a big one is how crowded the system is. From 2017 to 2021, the time it took to find permanent housing grew by 6 months. And part of that, like we saw with the DHA, is how hard it is to find fair rent placement. The harder it is for somebody to find a permanent home, the longer they stay in a shelter and the less room there is for others who need that. Oops. Homelessness is also impacted by mental health conditions, substance abuse, and mistrust of the system. Colin Davis pointed out that as it stands, the homeless system is really a separate entity from the public health system, even though the two of them are very closely tied, which leads us to our last challenge, that the data and support networks are fractured. Durham's continuum of care collects some data on what services it provides, but partly for privacy reasons, it doesn't really talk with other city systems. And since people experiencing homelessness have almost by definition slipped through some sort of official cracks, they can be underaccounted or misrepresented in official data, which can lead to a lot of work for caseworkers and ultimately make it more difficult for people to get the assistance that they need.
So just some final thoughts. Unfortunately, the housing crisis is very complicated. With over 11 hours of presentations, there was a lot of data and good points that we just couldn't get to today. I hope we have made them all available within the Omnibus for the public to look at. But housing is an issue with many different stakeholders and priorities. It's simultaneously subject to broad economic trends, but it's also personal to the individual. And it's the case that a lot of times those can frequently butt heads and make life difficult for us all. But despite the difficulty and complexity, we do want to thank the council for making this a priority over the past couple years. We really appreciate all the work you've put in, and we're hopeful for progress as you begin to implement solutions based on these presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation and the time it's taken you to go through the 11 hours of presentations. I did want to just first say that I spoke with former Mayor Elaine O'Neill last night or yesterday, and she did share that she wanted to say she would not be here, but she was definitely going to be watching, and she wanted me to clearly state that she was very proud of you both.
Thank you.
And she appreciated you going through all of that data and collecting and compiling it for us.
Of course, I'm happy to do it.
And I'm turning to my colleagues for questions, if there are any. I see Councilmember Cook.
Also an excellent job, y'all. I thought that was, I know y'all had a lot to tackle, and I thought that was really well done. I had a quick question about the investing in affordable housing preservation, and you had talked about the loan fund that was exhausted in 2022. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that fund was serving and where the money was coming from, and then kind of subsequently with the exhaustion, how that occurred? And
so I would probably point back to the presentation from the Triangle Apartment Association. I believe that presentation talked more about that particular fund, where it went, and where it could go in the future.
Madam Manager.
Thank you for the opportunity. There was a loan fund for a development loan fund that was made available in partnership with Self-Help. And that is the fund that is being referred to as having been exhausted. So there were multiple partners. I believe the total loan fund was about $10 million in total, with the city having a contribution to that. So local developers, nonprofit developers were able to access those loan funds in order to do, their developments at prices that allow the projects to be affordable. It really is expected to be a revolving type loan fund, but it takes time for the developers to be able to repay based upon the conditions. We do have, I think there is some funding still left in Forever Home Durham to help begin to replenish that loan fund along with the other partners.
Any other?
Couple of comments. Yeah, want to echo Councilmember Cook's comments. You've summarized a lot of information in a short presentation, so thanks for doing all that. I do feel like, I have to admit, and I would appreciate comments from Councilwoman Freeman. I feel like we're just kind of stepping in. This has been a long conversation for the last couple of years, right? So we're just, at least Councilwoman Cook and I are just stepping into this. There's a lot of recommendations in here, so I'm kind of wondering what was the plan for all those recommendations? Is that already being acted on, or where do we? Because there's a lot there.
And I think that's up to the council to either prioritize or figure out what items or which recommendations we want to move forward or look more deeply into. And so it'll be a matter of us making that decision. I think all of this information is for us and the public, because I don't think it all sits in the city to manage as well. And so I think it's a partnership. Though I'm hoping that the subcommittee on housing committee's meetings will continue, and that will be a good space to kind of continue this dialogue with all the resources around the Omnibus available to anyone who serves on it.
Thanks. And
I would also ask Councilmember Caballero, she's been here almost as long as I have. Maybe a month shy.
Yeah, thank you. I've actually asked the mayor, because one of the recommendations is to kind of reconvene a larger, broader housing group with both, people who have been historically involved in affordable housing, but also including people who are doing transit and land use to be more comprehensive. And so That is something that I have asked him if I could lead. And so we'll be providing updates in the next month or so around, I've been having conversations with Russell Pierce from Housing for New Hope. I think Councilmember Freeman was at our last joint city-county meeting where we were also talking about the continuum of care and some of the gaps within our homelessness work. And so we all know that this is broader, the idea of like affordable housing. There's been conversations around workforce development housing, including the county and the schools in those conversations. So to Councilmember Freeman's point, it's going to be bigger than just the city. It kind of has to be. And look forward to providing feedback to council.
Definitely.
Sorry, and just one last comment. I do want to, as the council's representative to the Durham Housing Authority Board, I did want to say, for the record, I think the number is maybe, I think 1 in 20 residents in Durham lives in public housing in Durham. So this is an important source of housing here. The comments in the presentation suggest a failed model, bad reputation. I think that, from my perspective, there's no reason public housing can't work. It works around the world. I think we just have not invested in public housing in this country. Our federal government has really abdicated their responsibility for that. But I think as a model, there's no reason public housing can't work.
And I think to the tune of $76 billion, when you say underfunded, it does kind of hurt itself. So I understand. Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, just to Councilmember's point, thank you for bringing that up. A lot of folks come to us, and while the city definitely has a critical role to play, so many of these things are we could put the whole city budget, which was last year, $610 million last year. We could put all of that money, every cent, into affordable housing or into housing. It would not cover what we need. And so this is a time where I, ask residents, remember, elections matter, not just at the local level, but at your state. There's plenty of states that have gotten in the game around affordable housing in a much more aggressive way than North Carolina has. And maybe why historically in North Carolina, it has been maybe urban centers in the last 10 years that have really struggled. Those struggles are being felt in rural communities and smaller communities as well, as we see an influx of residents. North Carolina was the 3rd fastest growing state last year and the year before, and that growth is not going anywhere. And so putting pressure on our folks at the General Assembly to really be a partner with us, local government folks, on housing, because we all know housing underpins so many other things in people's lives. Thank you.
And I would be remiss if I didn't add that I think that that's where the work has to happen, is more so at the state level, and then pushing around not just the rent level, but the actual tenants' rights. So there's a lot of work there. There's a lot to be done. And so again, if any other questions before I let these gentlemen depart? Thank you. I really appreciate you being here today, and a great presentation. This information will be available on the city's website, and I am working with the clerk to make sure that the links to all of the meetings, so that you can see them, you can review them. I know you weren't here, but that information is stored. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we are moving to our final presentation with the update, a presentation on bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act and others. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Winbush.
Good afternoon, Presiding Chair Freeman, other council members, Bertha Winbush, Deputy City Manager for Operations. At your January 4th meeting, City Council work session, you asked for an update on the federal and state grants from the BIL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. So we have prepared a presentation to update you on the status of the city's efforts to obtain these funds, future funding opportunities, and how the city will maximize the funding moving forward. Our presenters today are Mary Grace Stone King. She is a business services administrator in the city manager's office. Mary Grace is responsible for the day-to-day coordination of this work in our office across the organization. And Julia Brenman is a grants analyst in the finance department. Julia is the former CMO intern, and she's provided support to this work when she was in the city manager's office. Julia also continues to support our ARPA team as a member of the team. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Grace.
All righty. Bear with me while I
pull up our presentation. All right. Good afternoon, Madam Presiding Chair, council members, and City Manager Page. As Deputy City Manager Winbush mentioned, I'm Mary Grace Stoneking, and I am the Business Services Administrator in the City Manager's Office. We are really excited to be here today to present to you all an update on the city's efforts to secure funding for the bipartisan infrastructure law, and which we will refer to throughout the presentation as BIL, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which we will refer to as IRA. I also, before we get started, wanted to recognize we have a lot of support here, and the people who really do the work, I just help facilitate some of it. So I wanted to recognize folks from our General Services Department, our Solid Waste Department, our Public Works Department, our Technology Solutions Department, our Fleet Department, and also our Transportation Department as well. So we have a lot of folks here, and as we get more detailed into projects, I'll defer to them to answer your questions. So first I wanted to give some context around these two significant and unprecedented sources of funding. So the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, was signed into law in 2021. This funding is dispersed through different federal agencies, and 80% of the funding available is formula or non-competitive. So this meaning that the recipients of that funding are predetermined, as well as the amount of award they receive. And then 20% of the BIL funding is competitive, so those are the funds we can apply to with a competitive application. Additionally, I wanted to talk about the spread of opportunities. So a majority of those opportunities are transportation and energy funds, and then broadband and water making up the other opportunities. Additionally, I wanted to mention that most of the funding is over 5 years. So most of it is not one-time funding. A lot of times we even have applications that maybe didn't work out this year that we've gotten feedback on, and we can apply again in the coming year when those applications open again. For the IRA, this was signed into law in 2022. It is a mix of grants, loans, and tax incentives, and the focus of IRA is more towards private investment, so reducing costs for energy reduction products in healthcare, costs for families. But there are some opportunities for jurisdictions. And I also wanted to mention and note that both BIL and IRA funding is also available for local nonprofits to apply to, and not just jurisdictions. All right, so now to the city's efforts. Since 2021, the City Manager's Office has taken a more proactive, collaborative approach to seeking funds. We notice with this unprecedented funding that some of our departments needed some more support. So we were trying to centralize the process more by tracking and increasing that collaboration a lot through our monthly BIL and IRA meetings we have with departments. Also, since 2021, some departments have either already had or have gained staff that are dedicated to grant writing and grant management. However, we still have departments that either lack capacity because of staffing restraints or do not have a staff dedicated to writing grants. So because of that, we have started a partnership with Central Pines Regional Council. They have a representative here today, so in case there are any questions for them. So the Central Pines Regional Council is a local hub for support in this region for local governments. In July 2022, we entered into a contract with them that renews automatically annually. And with this contract, they help our departments go for these competitive funding opportunities through federal, state, and private funding by helping with research funding opportunities, project development, grant writing, external collaboration with other partners, grant editing, and reviewing. So now for the fun part. The update of where we are currently and the results of those efforts I mentioned. So we have applied to around $96 million worth of funding. We have been awarded over $56 million, and we are preparing applications for an estimated around $63 million. And I want to note here two things. So for these tables throughout, this will apply. With the applied, that is ones we've applied for and been awarded, a combination of those, ones we have not been awarded but applied to, and then ones that we've applied to and are waiting responses. And then second—
Just real quick, so, and I imagine that includes both BIL and IRA, correct?
Yes, yeah, and I'll show the distribution of the funding sources as well we've applied to.
And is that as of October 2023, or is that current?
So this is as of last Friday.
Sorry, one more interruption. Then that includes the 80% that's the non-competitive, or is this just the 20%?
This is the 20% competitive.
Thank you.
So also the preparing application, this is an estimate because some of the guidance around certain ones we are still researching and potentially looking to apply for haven't released the amounts you can apply for or guidance and criteria around that. So that likely that number will be higher. So I wanted to point that out. And we have this very fancy success rate of 74%. And this is of ones we've applied to. So that does not include the preparing, researching. So overall, we have been very successful. So the funding source distribution, as I mentioned, so most of the funding we've been going for is BIL or IRA, but we are still looking for, we also have applied for other sources such as private, maybe just other miscellaneous and state funding or federal funding that's not associated with those acts. There's also a very small percentage that is both IRA and BIL. And this is of what we've applied to. So we delineated these into categories. So we have our climate, energy, and environment, our public transportation, roads, bridges, and other infrastructure, and other programs. So other programs right now includes economic development, arts, broadband, and cybersecurity, and opportunities such as that. Just most of the BIL and most of the funding coming out right now is for those first three categories. And I also want to mention that some of these do overlap, as a lot of things do. And for instance, our Public Works Department was awarded a $250,000 grant for flood mitigation and stormwater repairs. We did our best to choose the category we felt most closely aligned with those projects. So for that, even though it is infrastructure, we did put it in our climate, energy, and environment category, considering the increasing risk of floods. All right, and now wanted to show the distribution of funding categories. So a majority, more than half of the applications we have applied to, are climate, energy, and environment, and then 28% being the public transportation. This really closely aligns with earlier what I showed you, especially through BIL, their kind of categorization of where they're investing those funds. So now I want to dive deeper into those categories. So first, climate, energy, and environment. We've applied to almost $50 million in funding. We've been awarded over $37 million, and we're preparing applications for over $26 million. And I wanted to highlight some of these projects that have been funded that we've been awarded for. So one, very exciting, there was a press conference for Mayor Williams held last week. Our General Services Department was awarded $4.8 million for EV charging stations. Also, our General Services Department was earlier, last year, I guess, was awarded $5.3 million for urban forestry and community forestry programming. And then our transportation department was awarded $5.7 million for electric buses. Public transportation, a lot of these are more, even though, as mentioned earlier, we have climate with electric buses, but public transportation is more about making transportation more accessible, reliable, and safer. So we've applied for over $26 million. We've been awarded over $11 million, and we're preparing applications for $16 million. And I just want to note that we have a different project highlighted than the presentation we sent on Friday. So this just is a larger project. Yeah. And then this is $10.8 million for Durham Station. And then roads, bridges, and infrastructure. You'll notice our preparing application is much higher because a lot of these we're still waiting for guidelines or waiting for further criteria to apply to these. But we've applied to around $8 million, and then we've been awarded $3 million. And this $3 million we wanted to highlight for the South Ellerby Restoration Project. More information about that project is on the Public Works website. And then for our other programming category, we've applied to over $11 million, been awarded over $4 million, and are preparing applications for around $900,000. So currently we are applying with Central Pines leading this application with Digital Durham and our TS department for a $500K digital and inclusion and literacy grant to provide more programming for residents on digital literacy. Also, our police department and community safety department was awarded around $400,000 for new approaches to involuntary commitments. And then our Office of of Economic and Workforce Development, I said that wrong, was awarded $1.7 million for reintegration of ex-offenders into the workforce. So now I want to give some more context around the efforts it takes to apply to these grants. These are, again, very unprecedented. They're very new, both for federal agencies and for the city of Durham. So I wanted to walk through the grant life cycle. Research funding sounds like we're just looking up funding. It also involves understanding eligibility, understanding criteria, understanding if there are matching funds required, and a lot more. Preparing an application requires not just writing an application. A lot of times that can involve project development. It can involve having to pay for assessments from technical experts to make our application competitive. It can also involve trying to get partners for those projects. And then we also have to manage and report, and that's the actual implementation, project management, and making sure we're compliant with federal and state reporting and also internal reporting. And then that is closing out the cycle. So since this is such a commitment, the city really has started to think very strategically about the funding we go for. So I want to highlight some reasons we may not apply. One, we're just ineligible. For instance, I know there was a water infrastructure grant, but it was only for rural communities with populations far less than ours. So we, obviously would not apply to a grant like that. It might not align with priorities we've already set for the city or in our departments with our strategic planning, and would take resources away from those priorities if we were to apply. Costs may outweigh the benefits. So some grants, a lot of grants require matching funds. A lot of times they can be maybe even 50% of what you're going to receive. And then on top of that, we might have to pay for an assessment again and to consider all the FTE and staff resources that would go into implementation. So sometimes we just do cost-benefit analysis and realize that the grant is not going to be worth all the effort to apply for it. Also, we might not be competitive. We might get this information where we have a project in mind to apply for, but it's just, we know it's not going to be competitive. Sometimes we get that information from the agencies themselves. Sometimes we get that through our experts at Central Pines. And sometimes we do realize that we're just not the best organization to apply. So we will share that grant opportunity and also usually write a letter of support for local organizations as well. So sometimes we're not going to be the lead on a grant application, but we do want a local organization to go for those funds. So in October of 2023, we held a facilitation through our innovation team, helped to lead, to help us kind of think about the barriers around departments are having around applying for these grants. So the biggest one being matching funds. Again, sometimes these grants are available, but then you find out they have required matching funds, and our resources in departments are for other priorities, and sometimes it wouldn't make sense for us to apply, or we might not have the funds available. Grant writing experience and expertise, we have that, but also, again, this is very, very new funding. Even federal agencies and state agencies are struggling to disperse these funds. So deadlines, guidelines, criteria are constantly changing. So our staff is really trying to stay on top of that, but it can be a very difficult landscape, even though we have staff who have that experience. Also, we have staffing gaps potentially. So again, those resources such as project managers, project delivery, that is on top of what they're already doing, adding these new projects. And even sometimes we have constrained procurement because the market is also strained because of all this funding. So even if we can contract out some of the implementation, it can be difficult to find contractors. And coordination. Again, a lot of times we will apply with other jurisdictions, other organizations. So coordinating those external partners as well as internal partners when departments work together for applying is a lot of work. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Julia to talk about more about our process that we're continuing to improve and build.
Good afternoon, Madam Presiding Chair, other council members, and Manager Page. As DCM Winbush mentioned, my name is Julia Brenneman, and I am a grant analyst in the Finance Department. So now that Mary Grace has discussed some of the barriers that we currently face, I want to walk through our process for tracking grant information since 2021. We've worked on centralizing the city's grant process through a combination of meeting regularly and tracking our progress. We alert departments with help from Central Pines, or departments alert us to opportunities. And then after we meet with departments, they provide recommendations on if the city should apply and for what project or program we should apply for. The city manager's office analyzes department responses along with the city's strategic priorities to determine whether we agree with departments. And then departments are asked to regularly update their progress in the City of Durham Grant Tracker. So here is the tracker. You can see that it's separated by departments, with one of the categories being unassigned. Even though there are 3 grants in that tab, those grants do have a home. They just happen to live with departments that typically do not focus on grant funds. We have been working to centralize our grant process since 2021, so there's quite a few grants included in that database. And we also keep grants in the database as the years pass so that we can reflect on previous efforts in the funding. And that helps us with future grant applications. So for the process of this visual, or for the purposes of this visual, I filtered out the grants under the do not qualify category. So therefore the numbers on the grants that are currently being, so therefore the numbers on your screen are just the grants that are currently being researched, applied for, awaiting award decision, or awarded. So here in this second picture, I have screen grabbed from the General Services tab, and here you can see what it looks like to have all of the detailed information listed out. This is incredibly helpful for us to quickly get status updates and learn more about the city efforts for specific grants. The first thing that may stick out is the red boxes, but this is just notifying us that the application date is passed. And actually, as you can see in the next column, this is okay because all of these grants have been applied for. And in this instance, all 3 of these grants were awarded to the City of Durham. The Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program was awarded to the city late last week after I took the screenshot. So also visible here is the amount applied for, a brief note on how the funds would be used, additional comments, and if the grant falls under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Departments are responsible for updating this tool, and the city manager's office is able to use specific staff members, many that you see here today, from various departments to gather additional information or ask specific questions. Staff does a great job providing updates and answering any additional questions that there may be. And at this point, I am going to hand it back over to Mary Grace, but I thank you for granting us your time.
Thank you for keeping it within 20 minutes. I appreciate that. And
All right, we're almost done.
Almost.
This is the last slide, I promise. All right, so I wanted to mention also with the barriers, of course, sometimes it's worth overcoming some of those barriers. So there are certain grants that we will overcome those barriers for. They're barriers, they're not complete roadblocks. But we're also looking at ways to continuously improve and more centralize the city's grant process. So one way is we started having more focused meetings. Originally having all departments meet around monthly IRA and BIL meetings was great because we were all learning. Now that we're getting a little more focused in and have these grants coming out that are more specific to departments, we are starting to schedule more focused meetings along with our Central Pines partners. Additionally, Central Pines is working with us to upcoming to have some facilitated project development strategy sessions. Sometimes when those grants come out, we don't have projects for them, so we'd like to start being proactive about developing these projects so when they come out, we have more of a solid base for applications. Additionally, Central Pines is going to be helping to provide more training around grant writing that will be recorded and available for our staff. And then we're also reevaluating and streamlining, looking at best practices of other jurisdictions around city grant processes and policies, and working closely with our finance department around that. And with that, any questions?
And now, thank you. Oh, and I understand that we do have someone online to speak, and I had Jennifer Carrigan with the City-County Environmental Affairs Board. If you want to raise your hands, we can unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for that presentation. It was really exciting to see, especially all of the progress that's been made since this October facilitated meeting. I think some of my comments or questions are really kind of drilling into some of the identified barriers and next steps. So you mentioned at the end that there's going to be some more effort to develop some projects in advance so that it would be easier and more competitive to apply for some of these things. And I'm just sort of curious about the overall strategy for grants capture. It sounds like when we talk about whether these are aligned with our priorities, I'm assuming you're talking about the strategic plan. But to my knowledge, and I may be wrong, to my knowledge, we don't have an overarching resilience plan. And so many of these funding opportunities are directly related to climate resilience. So I'm just wondering if having an overarching existing resilience plan that directly addresses our known climate risks would make this whole process easier, because I am curious about how does the existing grant strategy overlap at all with our known climate risks in Durham, because I don't know that our strategic plan necessarily directly addresses that. And then the last thing I'll say is just to drill in a little bit more on that coordination barrier. I know a lot of the upcoming funding opportunities require coordination with local community-based organizations, like applying, and I see that as a potential future barrier if we don't really have that type of coordination for the local CBOs to work with. And then lastly, coordination with the county and DPS, because we're all one big community. So I would also be curious about what the coordination is right now, co-applying with DPS in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you for those questions. I'll try to address a few of them, and then I'm going to defer to our General Services Department and our Sustainability Division for the Climate Resiliency Plan. So as far as applying with DPS in Durham County, thankfully, Central Pines has connected us to the main person over grants at Durham County. So we have reached out and we're trying to schedule a meeting, because I know they've also have been doing a lot of work to centralize their process. So I think we have a lot to learn from them, and I'm excited to hopefully continue to collaborate. And then with DPS, I think we're also, again, trying to coordinate. That will be a part of our improvement I hope in the future as we consider streamlining internally, but also having more solid connections to other folks seeking these grants. And now I will, and I don't know if Central Pines wants to, they also work with Durham County. They work with several local jurisdictions, and oftentimes they'll help us connect to those folks if they hear of an opportunity they know we can benefit from. I don't know if you have anything.
There's about 14 different counties.
Mm-hmm. Oh, come call me.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tara Natras with Central Pines Regional Council. I'm a management analyst and I work in our grant assistance program. So yeah, like Mary Grace was saying, we work with Durham County as well, so there's opportunities for coordination there. And we've been trying to bridge those gaps and bring them together. Like she was saying, we're trying to connect her with John Kiefer is their grants coordinator. He oversees all of the grants. They kind of have like a top-down structure for their grant approach right now at Durham County that's new. So that's something that is a potential to learn from and makes our coordination easier with them. And as far as coordinating with some CBOs, we've also helped the city coordinate with some CBOs in the area, and we have relationships with some of those organizations, so that's something we're striving to do as well, to increase that.
Thank you. And I was just going to say, I appreciate the resource that the Central Pines Regional Council has been. So.
Thank you, yeah.
And I'm going to open it up to my colleagues for questions. Councilmember Risk.
First of all, welcome, Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, thank you.
So first of all, thanks for the presentation. This is incredibly important stuff. As you know, this is like, and I think you said, Ms. Stone King, this is all kind of very new at our level, for Central Pines, for the federal governments, it's all new, but it's moving fast, right? So I appreciate your attention to all this stuff. I want to focus, I've got a couple questions on this, the more than half of the grants related to climate, energy, and environment that you mentioned. And I appreciate the comments from Jen Kerrigan from the Environmental Affairs Board. Jen, I hope you're still listening. Thanks for your comments. I want to build on her comment about this question about the strategy, right? And so, in the work you're doing, the grants you've gone for, the work you're doing with Central Pines, what's your sense of like how do you prioritize? What's the process for doing that? Because there's so much out there, right? So I'm curious, first of all, about like how do you prioritize these many different opportunities?
Yeah, and I might actually defer to Central Pines because they help us do that. And just say that it really depends on a department basis as well, because we look at projects they already have, we look at initiatives they want to be funded that are not funded, or ones that are already funded but could use more funding. And again, we look at the criteria of the grant and talk to different partners around the city if we think there might be a collaboration potential or of another department applying. So I will, oh, well, just kidding. Summer from General Services is coming.
Good afternoon, Madam Presiding Chair, Madam Manager, and members of Council. Summer Alston, General Services. So in terms of the city, we have a brand new strategic plan. We have a carbon neutrality and renewable energy action plan that feeds directly into that new strategic plan. And so our roadmap is fairly set in that way, but the reason that Central Pines and entities like Central Pines, the State Energy Office, and others are so important is because you really need that clearinghouse, that umbrella that aggregates things. My colleague Amy says, you know, the air we breathe doesn't stop at the Durham County line. And so a lot of the efforts have to be regional. As Madam Manager knows, we've been working with the county and DPS. We spent 2 years coming up with a collaboration with the county and DPS. But in the environment we're in now, with the time and the urgency, being able to rely on entities like Central Pines to say, hey, region, and understanding that things may be different for Chapel Hill and they have a different elected body that is going to expect different things from them, and being able to aggregate that into where are the common threads so that we can go after something that espouses as many of the regional priorities as possible is really, really important, and we're relying on it heavily.
I appreciate that, and thank you, Ms. Jones. Thank you for mentioning both the larger city strategic plan as well as the sustainability plan. I think those are important guiding documents. I will say, just for the manager and my colleagues on the council, that this is the carbon neutrality plan we have is an important plan. It's just for the city, right? So it's just for city buildings and city fleet. Many communities, including Raleigh and Asheville, have larger climate action plans for the entire community that includes community stakeholders as well as just the city. So I think it's something for us to consider whether our climate action plan should be broader to really address the broader community and not just I mean, I think our city fleet and buildings are important, but a larger plan, I think, would also be helpful. And as Ms. Kerrigan mentioned, having included in that plan some sense of climate resilience is also a key piece that I think we need in Durham that would be applicable for some of the federal grants that we need to add to that plan. So I think these are all areas we need to grow as a city, but I think it's important to know where we are now and how we can expand this work. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will add that the Central Regional Pines Regional Council does have a region-wide plan, and I think that will be helpful to kind of review as well. Councilmember Caballero?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all of the updates. I love when we win, always. And just quickly, is there a plan around a resilience? I mean, this has come up before, so I was just curious if city staff had, or is that something that you need direction from council?
Good afternoon, council member. That plan is in the works. The way that we've prioritized things based on the resources that we have and all of the things that you all know well that we've worked on over the past however many terms that you all have been here, yes, there might be jurisdictions that are approaching it differently, that have labeled it differently, that might even be ahead of us. But this regional effort that was alluded to today, that Mary Grace talked about, is what we are prioritizing right now as the building blocks for a Durham-based plan. Understanding that we may not be entering the conversation at the same place that Raleigh or Orange County might be, but that we're entering it where it matters because the money is now. And so the regional plan will have some Durham-specific outputs, and that's what we're going to rely upon, because if we tried to sort of parse should we have done it 3 years ago so we would be right exactly where somebody else is, that wouldn't address the issue, which is the here and the now. So is Durham going to be leveraging that regional plan to our betterment? That is intended to be the goal.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. So I know our sustainability roadmap, there's the dashboard. Is it tying, and I just haven't looked at it, so it could be there, and I haven't looked at it since campaigning. Is there a place for residents to directly link from our city website into that regional plan so that they can see, because to Councilmember Risk's point, people don't understand that there's maybe this regional thing going on. And so it's always in my mind, if our Environmental Affairs Board, which are some of our most savvy residents around environmental issues, have these questions, then that means the broader community might have these questions. And so where is that kind of information living, this kind of effort, which makes perfect sense so that folks are real clear that we are going after these dollars, that there is a regional plan. I mean, Carolina Pines just got rebranded, right? Like I think a lot of folks are used to, TJ Cog, right? And so then how are we communicating that? Where are we communicating that? And yeah, thank you.
And Councilmember Risk had a follow-up as well.
Yeah, just one of the follow-ups. So one thing that wasn't in the presentation, and I know there's so much to cover. You did a good job of sort of summarizing all that in 20 minutes. But I know the part of the whole stimulus piece, and this comes out of the White House, is the so-called Justice 40 initiative, that 40% of all these, well, not all these, but many of these grants should go to communities that have been historically marginalized or disinvested in. So what role does that Justice 40 play in our calculus of what grants we're going after? Related to that, I know some of the grants through the Department of Energy involve actual rebates or discounts to homeowners for replacing aging and sort of more dirty gas appliances, to replace them with energy efficient, like heat pumps and so forth. Those grants, I think, require a community partner with the city, for example. So again, this goes back to the question I think maybe Ms. Kerrigan asked, like, if there's a community-based group that wants to be involved in that, who do they contact at the city? What's the process for that? So talk to me about that whole issue of sort of these grants for disinvested and historically marginalized communities.
So I'll take a piece of it, but it takes a village, and it's a whole lot of people in here who have different elements of that in their work plans. For us, on the team in general services, because we are so infrastructure-based, our biggest priority right now is making sure that any facility, whether it be a community facility or our facility, has the infrastructure base that it needs to be able to perform in this space. But specifically to what Jennifer might be referencing, I really think some of the folks here can talk more. For example, the county just won a large grant that is completely community-facing. And as we said, if we need to improve our marketing with Central Pines about what might be included in this next big push, which is the CPRG and the resilience plan that comes out of that, if we need to be more outward in terms of our marketing, we can work on doing that. We have lots of small community-facing efforts, and so it's almost like you have multiple questions in your question. And so I'm going to step back and give somebody else a chance to highlight some of the parts and pieces that they know best. The Justice 40 question. You want to take that one?
Well, I was going to say a lot of the grants we go for are around Justice 40. We also look at our own data through neighborhood maps, and we think about and strategize with departments where those areas in need are in Durham. So for instance, I know the EV charging stations are actually in low income, historically not served neighborhoods. Additionally, I wanted to speak to the rebates a little bit. So I know the innovation team, Lindsay Gavin is over there, our innovation team manager. I know they're actually currently working on a project to think about how we can help residents better access those rebates and better access the purchasing of electric stoves and things like that to actually take advantage of the rebates. North Carolina has not yet put out guidance for those rebates. The federal government has, but North Carolina hasn't, but we're hoping this year they will. If there's any more questions on that, I would, ask Lindsay to maybe come up and talk about it, but I know they're in the early stages of looking at that as a project.
Good on Justice 40?
Oh, no.
I think so. I think this is probably a longer conversation, or the first of many conversations, so thank you. And yeah.
I would just add that I think it probably would be helpful to figure out how to track on the other side our community partners as well for their applications. I'm sure that's part of I'm sure it's in there, but being able to report that back will be helpful, especially on EAB side. Mm-hmm. And then also figuring out how to make sure someone from EAB is involved with those monthly meetings that you're having might be a little bit helpful as well. Those are my suggestions. I'm one person on this council. I'm just from being on EAB. I think that will be really helpful. Those folks are pretty passionate about the work that they do. Other than that, I think...
One last thing to your thing around EAB, and if they can't participate, potentially doing periodic updates there so that there's again, that clear communication back to residents around the work, I think, is really, really important.
So, if there aren't any other questions, comments, then I'm going to thank you all for providing this presentation.
I just wanted to come up and thank Mary Grace and Julia. This is their first time presenting in front of City Council, and they actually volunteered to do this today, and so I want to thank them. And we have such supportive partners in our departments who are always willing to be here to support us so we can get you all answers in real time. So I want to thank our department directors and others in the departments for being here with us today.
And I'm sorry, I just can't help but to notice there's a lot of femme power on that team.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks to the village.
And I do believe we just have the one item for Madam Clerk. Did you want to share?
Yes, thank you, Madam Presiding Chair. And Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, you're back. Welcome. I did want to update everyone on the Durham City County Environmental Affairs Board appointment. We have received a 7th vote from Mayor Williams, and Tom Campbell has received 4 votes. So we can remove that from the GBA, or I'd like to request that we do that.
Which item is that, Madam Clerk?
That's item number 1. There had been a tie, but Mayor Williams has voted since, and we now have a nomination.
Thank you. I think, okay. We want to settle the agenda, Madam Manager?
You have a majority nomination, but do you want it on, still want it on GBA? You do. So we can.
We don't need to. It's fine to move it to consent agenda.
So just for making it okay, I'll reset the agenda. Okay, so now the agenda will be for consent, items 1 through 3, and items 7 through 14, and item 5 will be on the GBA section of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to gavel us out on adjourned?
I'm going to let you do the honor. I just want to make a quick comment. I want to, on behalf of the mayor and myself, thank Councilmember Freeman for what I know was excellent leadership today and bring you greetings. The president says to say hey to Durham. That's it. Thank you all so much for carrying on in such an excellent way. Madam Presiding Chair, would you land us, please?
Yes, and we are adjourned at 3:37.